Never silent, do 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 do. Coming at you live.
Good. Do you like my background?
Yeah, it's actually pretty nice.
It's very
Spicing life
green.
up.
We've got the very for our video watchers today, got a very green vibe going on. Hello everyone. Thanks for joining this morning. I'm on the road, so I'm
On the road again.
on the road again. So I'm coming to you from a new place, not the usual living room background. So if you're here, drop a hello in chat. I'd love to say hi.
Okay, Morgan. It is that time.
Mhm.
What is the question of the day?
Ooh, what is a place in your country you've never been to, but you want to go?
Ooh.
So we had an international question, I think, last week, and this time a national question. What's somewhere in your country, like a city or a town that you've always wanted to go that you've never been able to go to, or never gotten to yet?
I think I would like to go to none of it, which is way the hell up north. And the last time I went up north, I went when there was the light season, so it just never gets dark. Then I went in the dark season where it's basically just dark for like 30 days. But the Northern Lights
Hmm.
is something that is just so utterly mind blowing
Hmm.
that I don't even know how to explain it. So I'd be cool to go up none of it and go and explore and see what it's like compared to the Yukon or the Northwest Territories. How about
I love
yourself?
that. It's a good question. I mean, I've been to a good chunk of like the West Coast, so maybe I'd say um like Glacier National Park up in Montana,
Mm,
Idaho area against the Canadian border, actually.
it's really nice.
So I've heard. I've never been. I've had friends go, and I think it's gorgeous. So Sod says, "Come to Canada. We'll go together." Sounds good, man. Good to see you here. Good to see everybody dropping in places in their country that they've never been to yet, but would love to go. That's the question of the day.
Saj, you'll
Um,
have to come to Calgary and we'll go to the Stampede.
mm, that's great, man. I love
Okay.
Colorado has that stuff too. Today, the content question.
But why? Why do we care as sellers about content, Morgan? You hear so many people talk about it and they're like, yeah, you should produce content. But honestly, why do I care? I get judged on booking meetings and closing shit. Why do I have to care about content?
I'll say as like somebody who did a lot of brand marketing and content marketing for a long time, I think I would have like a year ago defaulted to the position of like, well, content's important for like brand exposure or for all the sort of like normal marketing reasons people give, you know?
It depends.
Right? It depends. But ultimately like, oh, content's like about brand and it's about getting your name out there and it's about, getting uh, uh people engaged. But honestly, I think over this last year, what I've realized and what's important to me, and what's important to sellers is that content builds trust at scale. So ultimately, we do business with people we know, like, and trust. And marketers spend a lot of time on the knowing and the liking. But what actually closes deals is the trusting. And trust can come out in lots of different forms, but ultimately it's, is this worth my time? Am I going to take this risk? Is the risk worth it? And the way that oftentimes you overcome risk is through trust. And that's why rapport is important. That's why charisma can be important, but not always. But ultimately, that's why trust is important. The problem is, Nick, and you know this, we only have so much time in the day. Like, we can only call so many people, email so many people, send so many connection requests. I mean, even from the algorithm, we're sort of limited on that. So the question becomes, how are you leveraging your presence? And content is leverage. So content is a little bit of effort. If you think about like the fulcrum point and you got a big weight on one side and a small weight on the other side, content is that little bit of effort that can produce, when done right, a lot of results. Not because content's good on its own or it's for brand exposure for all the marketing reasons, but for the selling reason that content can be in the room when you're not. Content can build trust at scale. You can reach your audience with just a post without sending a DM, without sending an email, without calling them, right? So when done right, content can reach your target audience and get them to know you, to get them to trust you without you having to do one-on-one calls. That's to me why it's so important.
The hardest thing when I was doing cold calls and like volume outreach is I didn't have trust. And depending on how you open that call, also credibility. But right now, if you're cold calling, if you're emailing, whatever your main outreach channel is, what do you think people do when they see your name? Seriously,
Mm-hmm.
why do you think whenever you go and send out an email blast, why do you think you all of a sudden get a whole bunch of profile views?
Mm-hmm.
So unless you have a really good blog with somebody that understands SEO, the first thing that comes up is LinkedIn.
Yeah,
And for
actually,
most people,
even this week we've held a lot of live shows, and at the end, and some of it's, yes, we're live on LinkedIn, but a lot of the time, and even with podcast interviews we've been doing, it's like, where can people find you? It's a pretty open-ended question, and everyone has been saying, connect with me out on LinkedIn,
yeah,
follow me
every
on
single
LinkedIn.
person, like even the people that say they're cold call
Mhm.
forward, they don't give their number out.
No,
They don't give their email out.
so
They
here's my
give the
LinkedIn
social
profile.
channels.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter. We've gotten that a couple times. Hey, check me out on Twitter because that's where I live, which is
TikTok.
fine. Or TikTok. We've gotten that a couple times. But ultimately, I think about like how one of the things we've talked about in previous live shows, but has really come to the fore recently is if social is one part of your sales development movement, if social is one part of your overall motion, you're not just social selling, but you're also multi-threading with email and calling, because that's what modern sales pros do. They're not just dedicated to one channel. That's clear. Social through content is a way to warm up all of your leads. You can build trust with them before you ever call them, before you ever email them, and it can change the overall motion. And we're going to talk about how to do that, I think, in a little bit.
Yeah, why don't we dive into that? Like,
Hmm.
what does a campaign look like, and where does content fit into it as a seller? I hope that we have lots of marketing people listening that are going to go and provide that overwatch, that ground cover, air
Mm,
cover, so that this works even faster with more reach. But what we have to talk about is when you're building lists, that's where this all starts.
mm,
Knowing who you're talking to. If you don't have a solid list, you're going nowhere fast. And it was like my post today about Where's Waldo. You're going to spend a lot of time sitting there looking at the page wondering, so who should I talk to? And then what should I say? Because there's no method to the madness. You're just, trying to scale luck. And
mhm,
that sucks.
mhm,
And so what you got to do is you got to build your first list based on what are the minimum requirements for someone to work with your company, not an individual, a company. So, do they need to have a certain amount of headcount in a department? Do they need to be in a certain area? Do they need to be using certain technology? You need to build a list, a very robust list that disqualifies a lot of people because you don't want to waste people's time or yours on people that aren't a good fit because that does not build a healthy business. Once you have this minimum requirements, a lot of people go and build their list off of that.
mhm,
But they'll do demographics. So now what you want to do is instead of doing demographics and stopping there is you want to go and actually build lists based on triggers or pains. And so this, what it goes is from why change to why now. And
mm.
that why now is like sometimes they see it, sometimes they don't. They're symptoms of pain, something underlying that is your reason for existing, right? You don't just start a company because you think it's a good idea, I hope.
I,
You start a
I mean,
company because you see a problem that exists that you can't find anything else to fix it. And that is our job in sales is to sniff that out like a detective to figure out what that big problem is that is so compelling, so that comes up so often that people just can't ignore it. They can for a little bit, but there's a certain breaking point where that workflow doesn't work or that there's a ratio where after a certain ratio that sales motion is going to fall apart. Maybe it's not sustainable, or maybe it's not cost effective based on their pricing. How do you find that company is experiencing pain? And these triggers are based on things that you learn by, you can go on your company's website, look at the case studies, look at the quoted text, and look at what the problems and what they state there. Reverse engineer that and like, okay, what would show this as a pain? How do you find a specific prospect? So it's, forget prospect. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about individuals. This is where we fail as salespeople, is we focus on individuals. Individuals come after. So that is the routing into the account, which there's 3 different options, but we default to this. We need to go back. We got to figure out what is a trigger in the company. So it could be a role that didn't exist before. So now they're hiring sales enablement. That means that they're actually putting content first, kind of like today, right?
Hey.
If you know a sales enablement person that's building content for you guys, tag
Mm-hmm.
them. They'll love this. And
Mm-hmm.
we'll do our best to give them as many resources today as possible. And I can even go and give you guys a Bessemer go-to-market scaling to 100 million ARR, so that
Mm-hmm.
you can work on your business acumen and look at some of the challenges that you can actually quantify the pain. But
Mm-hmm.
it could be growth rate or lack thereof. So a department is shrinking. Why? What would cause that to happen? Does that reflect on a problem that I solve? Is it a weird ratio like we were talking about before, that, it's a sales driven organization, so they have a 5-to-1 sales to marketing ratio? It means that marketing isn't as important. But is that scalable? Does that matter? If it doesn't matter, okay, well, we got to move on. And what you're looking for is these triggers. Maybe they just bought new technology and you know that you go really well with that technology. One of the most common ones that we hear is they just raise funds.
Mm-hmm.
So what? What problems come with additional funding? Is that funding because it's from a PE or a VC? Does it depend on that funding source? Does it depend on if it's a new debt financing round because they went to the bank and they got a different type of revolving door? You got to really dive into the details, because those details are what define and lead to the real problem. And nobody's going to come out and say, hey, my sales is struggling right now. Our average SDRs are only, achieving about 40 to 50% of quota. You're not going to get somebody writing that on the wall,
No.
but there will be business repercussions that show up in analytics somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And this is
Well,
how you segment based on pain.
and Kyle Williams, who came on the show, he has a great podcast episode. He always said that in B2B, we're not doing pharmaceuticals. Like, we're not doing rocket science here. It's not the cost of failing at this is actually quite low. So if you don't get it right the first time, that's okay. Nobody's gonna die, right? It just
I
means you
forgot he
didn't
said
reach the
that.
right people. So what's so important to me about this exercise, and as Jordan Crawford brought up on a previous live show or an episode, is sort of like avoiding the ditch. So if you look at your existing customer pool and you can see that this customer was heading towards the ditch, then they hired us and they avoided that ditch. And then you look out in the market and you say, what are the other companies that are also going towards that ditch? Then it's Patrick in the comments says, I'll die. That's funny. Says, you look out in the market and you say, what other companies are also heading towards that ditch? And here's the thing. And there was a comment thread on a post I had yesterday about this. These are fundamentals no matter the channel you're using. These things apply whether you're calling, these things apply whether you're emailing, these things apply whether you're using social selling, right? Social selling is a channel and it has its own tactics, it has its own methods. But whether you're doing cold outbound email based on those same triggers or pains, or you're ramping up on social based on those triggers and pains, it starts with just understanding your market. As Chris threw in chat, people are already talking about their pains. Find where those conversations are happening. This actually is a great segue, if you'll allow me, Nick, that one of the things I do a lot in bridging the pain conversation with the content conversation is social listening. And so the sort of, I don't know, 3-minute version of this, which we have the very intensive in our LinkedIn at 30 minutes playbook, but the 3-minute version of this is you go out and you find the influencers that your target audience follows and interacts with. So you pull up basically like 20 to 30 profiles of your target audience. You look at their activity. Who are they liking? Who are they commenting? And then you look at those influencer accounts that they're liking and commenting, and you sort of filter through, are they active? Are they the right kind of content that I could engage with, etc. And then you hit the bell on those influencer profiles, and then you start engaging in the comments. But then separately, you pull up like a Google Doc or Notion or spreadsheet or what, however you like to capture your thoughts, and you start copying and pasting the questions that people have and the ways that they're talking about their problems. And this is just so this can inform the targeting and pain when you get better and better at targeting and pain by doing this, but it also bridges into the content conversation, which is what do people want to know? What are they stuck on? What are they struggling with? What can I speak to? And I think this is the sellers that we've worked with really get hung up on this. Like, well, what do you mean? What can I speak to? It's like, well, not every question out in the world you have to answer. And not every question somebody has about your product you have to answer. It is, what are the fundamental things people need to know about our company or about our product before they work with us? And I'll say that again for effect because I'm in that mood today. What are the few things that people need to know about us or our product before they work with us? What's stopping them from buying
Or making the change.
or making the change? That is content in a nutshell. And yes, if you're a content marketer, there's a lot more complicated stuff that goes into this, but who cares, right? We're focused on sellers today. And when you're doing content as a salesperson, it does not have to be complex. You don't need the 40-page spreadsheets. You don't need the matrices. You don't need all the different colored boxes. You don't need, if you've ever seen a content planning method, like, it's important to have a method to the madness. But if you're stopping yourself because you look at a content marketing plan and you say, I don't know about that. Okay, that's fine. Throw it out the window. Let's do something different.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of as being a seller. I'm like, yeah, sometimes I'd go to branding and marketing and be like, are the colors right? I never
Yeah.
ask any of those questions. But to go shift back and like bring this back into perspective, because what Morgan is talking about is so critical, because you have, once again, those minimum requirements. That's your total addressable market. Yours as an individual, because it can change per rep. If you have a geography or if you have a certain technology, if there's something specific to, say, you're selling into a different size, like it's SMB versus mid-market versus enterprise, this will also change per rep. So you got to keep this into consideration so you're not off in the wilderness where you can't sell or get credit for it. The next step is these triggers that we're identifying, and it takes practice because those triggers will lead to the messaging. Well, this messaging is the next part. It comes from routing into the account. Are you going to go high? Are you going to go low? Or somewhere in between? And you have to answer this question, and do not start here.
No.
This is what we do too often, and this is what makes it really hard to do good outreach, because you don't actually have a good reason to reach out. It kills your credibility. People can smell it because they're like, hey, I'm just reaching out. We have this amazing product. Cool. Why do I care? That's what they're going to ask. But when you've done this hard work of saying, this is the minimum, and we're sorting by these triggers, now you can find that. That's an observation. Hey, I just saw that you guys, you hired 10 people over the last year, but you just hired 50 in the last month. That's a big change. We've noticed that when companies go through this, they also then struggle with retention because of training. We help so-and-so go and increase their training and ramp period, blah, 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 blah. Interested? But see, now you have a reason. That has messaging. But that messaging is based on who you're talking to. And this is where the ground cover air support, Overwatch, whatever the hell you want to call it, comes into, is that while you're running these campaigns, because they should be 30, 60, 90 days, because pains have expiry dates where they're not as painful anymore, you got to think of, okay, if I'm going high level, top line, bottom line, risk, how am I speaking to those things? What is going on in their day-to-day, in those boardrooms, in their reporting structure, in their workflows, that I need to understand, and I need to go and give myself credibility and content. So this all flows into your messaging and how you're doing your outreach. But now you're providing yourself cover, because when people look for you on LinkedIn, on other platforms, this will show up.
Mm-hmm.
People do look. They'll at least look at your profile. Most people that I talk to now will look at your content and your recent activity. And one of the things they look at is if you're putting out salesy bullshit.
Yeah.
If you just have promo or you're just resharing company pages, they will not connect with you because they know you're going to pitch them.
Mm-hmm.
When you're putting out this value-based content, it is helping customers to become better buyers. So essentially what you're doing in this process is they have already bought the suit. They are coming to you because they need to help tailor it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the change with social selling and modern sales is we can educate them throughout this process, but if we don't take the initiative as individuals and as companies to dial this in so that it's strategic, we're running everywhere. We're not learning, we're not dialing in our messaging, and we're not getting better with each approach, and we're selling ourselves short. And this is how content actually matters in sales.
The confusion that I think we hear a lot, and maybe if you're watching this or listening to this, you feel this too, is that social selling is all about indirect, right? So basically, when you're doing social selling, it's about influencing people. And I think there's a time and a place for that. And I think some people are really good at that, right? Like, and we've had a number of people who are really good on that on the show, like Zoe Hartzfeld is a great example of somebody who now sits in a community role but has a sales background and built up this large following on LinkedIn. That's rare. It's sometimes very hard to do, and it takes a particular mindset and skill set. What we're talking about today is not becoming an influencer and not using content to become an influencer.
Mm.
We are talking about outreach, but indirect. So instead of thinking about all of your outreach methods, direct messages, in-mails, calls, emails, etc., as outreach, and then content, think about all of your outreach methods, and content is one of them. How can you leverage your content as outreach? Now, the reality is it's not going to look like an email, but we all know this. An email doesn't sound like a phone call, and a phone call doesn't sound like a DM you have with a prospect on LinkedIn. Same thing with your content. Your content is a form of outreach. It is reaching your target persona at your target accounts based on what Nick went through, but it's indirect. It's leveraging the algorithm. It's instead of a direct email. It's leveraging your presence on the platform and your engagement on the platform as a social seller, as somebody who's engaged with other people on the platform, but it's still outreach. So now the question that I have, we can answer this, is, and when we start engaging like this, is how do I create content that's also outreach? Like, what does that look like? How does that work? And I think the fundamental principle here is no pitching and no shadow pitching. Okay, you're not going to write a post and be like, "Here's how great the product is," because you'll get 2 likes and 1 comment from you, and everybody will ignore it. Content is about educating the market. It is about influencing the market. It's about all the normal content and influencer stuff, right?
Morgan, I will add in just right here.
Oh
We
yeah, yeah,
all
yeah.
start there.
Oh, I've done it.
I did it. Like you'd write a good post and then you put your plug in at the end or you throw your
Mhm,
plug in the comments.
mhm.
Everybody starts here. You don't have to go and feel bad or like harp on yourself or whatever.
No.
It's a building process.
Mhm.
So I just want to go and make sure you know that because don't let that stop you from posting content. It's part of the growing pains.
And honestly, like, it works for some people, right? Like, the uh they have, a plug if they have a course or whatever, but that's because that's their method and that's how they're building a funnel. For us, because the funnel in B2B is not they can click a page and buy a course, very different in our space. It requires a different method to the madness. So here's where I start in content. When I think about, as a seller, how do I put out a piece of content? And I'll be honest, if you're really like stuck on it or really afraid about it, forget your target accounts. Write about something to your peers. And actually, this is where most SDRs and account executives start. If you pull up great SDR and account executive profiles, they're not posting content that's directed toward their target audience. They're posting content that's sales memes, that's jokes, that's like retros on the failed cold call, that's outtakes from Vidyard. That kind of content serves two purposes. One, it gets you visible on the platform, which is good. It leverages the algorithm, but it also trains a muscle. Much like I'm still sore today, and I haven't been to the gym in a couple of days. I've been working out some new muscles, right? This week included some rear delt flyouts, and I'm still feeling that, right? I pushed myself, but the thing about building muscle in content or in the gym is it requires practice, right? And the funny thing about weightlifting is it's called resistance training, right? So when you're writing content, you're going to feel resistance. You're going to feel that little voice that's like, no, 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 you can't post that. That's not good enough. Okay, push through that. You're just doing some reps here. You're doing some reps and sets. You're going to create content for your peers first, maybe just to train that content muscle. Talk about a recent call you had. I mean, keep things anonymous if you're going to talk about an actual client because you don't want to reveal personal information. But start telling stories, start experimenting. The point is not to get 20,000 likes on your first post. The point is to post. It's to train that muscle. It's to do the reps and the sets of creating content. And then from that foundation layer, we can accelerate this and make it much more focused. But I didn't know if you had anything to add, Nick.
Well, I think the one thing everybody needs to hear is you don't need to be an expert. A lot of people, because there's just so much information, need people that can package it in a way that's digestible,
Mm.
that's interesting. Go talk to CS. Ask them about who they hate to work. I mean, ask them who they love to work with. Who are the people that see the most value? Ask them about things that are misunderstood when they start using the product. Ask them which users become the best power users. What is similar about all of them? Try to find these commonalities and just turn it into content. And the more you do it, the better you get. Play with images, go and use video. The more things you try, the easier it gets. But you got to think, what will give my users a promotion? What will give the management and leadership the recognition that they're craving? What's in it for them as an individual? How will this help their customers by helping themselves? And start to think of what's going on behind it as you get in the process. And you will push past the resistance to find new levels, new thought process that gets you more stepping into the shoes of your customer. And this is when you'll notice that people's engagement jumps. And look at yesterday's cold calling session.
Mm.
It blew up. We had over 600 people that registered. We had over 345 people live, and we have over 30,000 watch minutes. Why? Obviously there was a need. It wasn't being done. And there was a community that was starving for that information because it didn't exist or it wasn't easy to find. Be that community. And before you're that community, find those communities and comments on those top influencers. Just go and show up there every day. Then start your cold calling and your emailing.
And that's what I was just about to say. The thing we always hear from account executives more than SDRs, but SDRs too, is, okay, this sounds great, but it sounds like it's a lot of time, Nick. And it's like, no, not really. I'll be honest with you. I think you and I spend somewhere now. I mean, we're a little more active than most, but we spend somewhere between like 30 minutes and an hour per day in thoughtful engagement. So when I think about the things that I need to do as a seller in a day, I can chunk 30 minutes of time out to do a little bit of engagement. And here's the thing, we don't want to put the cart before the horse. We don't want to think we're going to create a community or we're going to get our peers super excited about everything on our first post, on our first comment, right? Consistency matters more than splashy stuff. It matters that you continue to show up. One of the most interesting experiments I think you and I did early on when we were proving out our comment strategy was, how long does it take to get the attention of an influencer? Now, we're not talking about Gary Vee here. We're not talking about the millions or hundreds of thousands of influencers. We're talking about smaller accounts, 10 to 15 to 25 to 30. And in my estimation, if I recall our numbers correctly, it was about 2 weeks of engagement. Because the first couple of times, you're another name on their list that gets put in their notification. But then the fourth time you comment on their post, they're like, oh, they start showing up. And then by the end of the second week, they're like, this person's super active, right? And maybe you get a thoughtful response one time because you had a really good comment. And so you're starting to build up that trust. So what matters, if you only did one post on week one, day one, and another comment, excuse me, one comment on week one, day one, and one comment at the end of week two, you would not achieve the same results. The results happen because you were consistent. And the same thing goes with content. Well, let's make something really clear here. Commenting is content. Commenting is also leverage. Commenting is leveraging the algorithm to get in front of your target audience. Because if you've done what we had listed out earlier in the social listening exercise, and you found the influencers that your target audience pays attention to, your target audience is going to be scrolling through the comments. And by the numbers, 9 out of 10 people, 90% of users, or whatever the figure is, it's really, really high. It could be 90, it could be 95, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood. Never like and never comment. But what they do is they read. They passively scroll through the platform. And so,
Especially their peers of the
especially their
same
peers.
level.
Especially their peers. So, and that's the thing when we start asking, okay, I'm going after FP&A managers at Series C, Series D companies. That's fine. That's great. Who do those FP&A managers pay attention to? Well, okay, there's maybe a nexus of titles who are their peers, maybe directors of finance, maybe directors of M&A. Some of the who do they pay attention to? Okay, you hop in their comments, you start thoughtfully engaging. Maybe you add a perspective, you ask a question, there's lots of comment strategies, which we're not going to get into today. We got lots of other live shows about that. And you start getting their attention. That's leverage. That's a little bit of effort to get in front of a lot of people. It's outreach, but it's indirect instead of direct.
And think of how that looks. Even like go back to the old days
Oh,
of when you used to go and do stuff in person and you would see somebody that you've always wanted to talk to talking to someone that you know. And you're like, how in the hell
mm-hmm.
are you talking to this person and they know you?
Mm-hmm.
That is what happens in comments. But I want to hit pause and I want to go
Yes.
and do a quick overview of where
Yes.
we're at.
Yep.
So you built a list based on the bare minimum. Each of these lists are triggers. This is direct outreach. This is a direct strategy. I will tell you right now, and this is what I hear from a lot of people, their connection rate is less than 30%, something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Good outreach on LinkedIn in particular should net you higher than 30%. Reps that are doing this really well are somewhere between 50 and 80. You will never get 100% because you're going to be doing too much volume. There's just some certain people that don't respond to sales or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But you want to go and track your outreach. You get a max of 100 connections or invitations a week. Use them. And when we're using these triggers, it's observation, why that observation is a problem, social proof or solution, soft call to action. Track it. If it's less than 30%, you need to dial in where the problem is. Is it your messaging? Is it your
Mm-hmm.
list and what trigger you set? Is it who you're routing into? Is it because maybe bottom up is easier because the people on your users are actually more responsive on LinkedIn or just to salespeople in general? But you have to keep doing this. That's only one of the layers. What Morgan is talking about right now is another layer. In sales, you shoot yourself in the foot when you lean on one layer, even if it's just cold calling, emailing, social selling. You need
Sure.
to take direct and indirect. When I used to go and be a road warrior, we also used to go and network into the communities to
Mm-hmm.
earn trust and show up in the right circles to earn referrals.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we're doing with these comment strategies is both research, strategy, and trust at scale.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're learning what these people are talking about. We're showing up in the right circles to go and earn that credibility to get those introductions or have people when you keep showing up, they'll feel comfortable to reach out and connect with you.
Mm-hmm.
So, what happens in any of these outreach channels is a seller will go and move from, okay, they're doing outbound and hitting quota. The next level is how do you get inbound to exceed outbound in terms of leads? And this is where you got to start really watching. You got to reverse engineer. Was it my comments? Was it my comments on a certain place? Was it the events that I was jumping into? Another really good one is going on LinkedIn and searching for keywords in posts that are already happening. So, what are signs of pain that people are going to be talking about? I hate cold calling. I have no idea who I should be talking to. I don't know how to build a list, or some that we hear all the time, or announcements that somebody just got a sales enablement role.
Mm-hmm.
Find those trigger events, jump on them, and add them into layers.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side of that is completely indirect, and that's the content.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, one of these by themselves isn't that effective. It's slow. When you wrap them all together and you start to go and look at what's actually working, you're going to find your superpower as a seller.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has it. Some
Mm-hmm.
people are just better on the phones than they are at something else. You have to find your superpower and lean into that. And then use the other tools, because you don't need to be working 60, 80-hour weeks just to go and hit quota.
Absolutely. So I couldn't have said it better myself, actually, honestly, Nick. That was a banger. Where my head is at
That's funny.
is can you please repeat how you find keywords from comments on LinkedIn? A question in chat. So what you're doing, so there's actually two ways. There's the sort of manual and long-term way, which is you find the influencers that your target accounts are following and engaging with, and you hit the bell on their profile so you see their posts, and then you look at their posts and you scroll through the comments and you see what are people commenting. The other is a hard keyword search in LinkedIn search bar, and that's going to mostly pull up posts but not comments. And what a hard keyword search is, it's a Boolean search, but basically you're putting quotes around your search term, even if it's 2 or 3 words, and it's going to look for exact match. So if you searched for sales navigator, it's not going to look for sales or navigator whenever somebody throws that out. It's going to look for the exact phrase sales navigator as you write it. So those are two ways.
And then what you can
Yeah.
also do is find posts.
Mm-hmm.
So click posts, scroll over, and there's, oh shit, do you remember what
Oh,
it is?
it's like it's one of the filters you can say either
Sort by, I think it is.
it's a sort by
And it's either top or chronological,
recent. Mm-hmm.
recent.
Mm-hmm.
Watch that. The other one is author industry.
Love the author industry, yes.
So know what if you're in software development or you're in manufacturing, they're all there.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes a smaller list. You'll find, though, when you dial that in, you don't need to use that
Mm-hmm.
as much.
So where I thought I wanted to introduce the last concept for today, and that's the content prism, which is sort of the way I've been thinking about this. So if you've seen Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon cover, it has the prism triangle, and you got the one beam coming in one side, and you got the many colors coming out the other side. Okay, so that's the content creation. Okay, so you have a singular idea coming into the content prism, and it gets blown out into all different sorts of things. So this is where everybody gets so confused, because this is where a lot of content marketer trainers and influencers have made a lot of money, because this is hard. And so there's going to be 20,000 different frameworks out into the world that will teach you how to build your own content prism. It will teach you how to take a single idea, a comment, a question, or whatever, blah, 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 and then lo and behold, you have a post. Okay. And so this is, the meme of magic goes here, or like magic formula here, or something like that. That's this content prism, and it's where everybody gets held up on. So what is so important is most people start at the content prism and don't do all the work we just talked about. They say, what should I write about? And so they're looking retroactively at the single beam, and they're saying, what idea should I write about? Well, here's the thing. If you know your list and you have your target accounts and you have your target personas and you've been engaging with them directly, either DMs, connection requests, or comments, and you've been social listening and you've been capturing all of that, and yeah, it's a little manual work, but even in 14 days, even 2 weeks of investment on this, and just a little copy paste over and over again, you're going to end up with a pretty big document with all different kinds of interesting topics or questions or whatever. And so now, instead of asking, what should I write about? It becomes, how do I write about this? Okay, so you have the single beam coming into the content prism. So, for example, it could be a topic or a question. Somebody asks, well, how do I get in front of my target accounts easier? That's something that people ask us. How do I do cold outbound on email? That's something that people ask Will Allred all of the time. How do I I was thinking of our Dooley example from yesterday. Like, how do I get my sales team reps to log their stuff in Salesforce? Okay. Whatever. Whatever those questions are, you select one. And the more specific, the better. You don't want to have a topic or an idea that's like personal branding, okay? Because it's too big. You want something specific that somebody has said or somebody has asked to bring into the little prism. And then once you're in the prism, all you're going to do is you are going to write headlines. Now, this is me as like somebody who's done this for a while, and I will tell you, this is the most frustrating exercise when you first start. And I say that in complete compassion for everybody who's going to do this for the first time. All you want to do is you want to write 20 different concepts, 20 different ideas of how you could answer that post. And I want to number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way down. And an answer to a post. How do I do cold outbound better? Well, a headline, a short sentence of the idea is, warm up through social content. That's something we've been talking about today. Another is better targeted lists. Also something we talked about today. A third is let's do like better formulated outreach, basically, a refined messaging on outreach. A fourth is on and on and on. What are all the possible or potential answers? Some of them you'll be able to talk to, some of them maybe not, and that's okay. And then here's the magic sauce. And this is what people don't really talk about. Go look at what marketing has produced on this topic. Because your marketing team has probably put out a blog post loosely related to this, has put out a post on your company's content feed. They've probably produced a collateral somewhere. Maybe there's a pitch deck that talks about it. Maybe there's presentations. Now, maybe your enablement manager might have this. Maybe your marketing team will have this. Maybe it's on your site or on a social feed. The thing is, this is the path of least resistance. You could take your 20 different ideas and take one of them and try and write something from scratch. But really, you want to see what's already out there at my company. What already exists that I can use? And so what you want to do and what's most successful is, let's say we selected the topic about warming up prospects through social content. Okay. So maybe we have a blog post on this in our marketing side. And so I'd take a look at the marketing post and I'd look at how they wrote it. I'd look at how they talked about it. And then all I'm doing, which Laura Erdem at Dream Data does exceptionally well, so you can follow her feed, is she asks, how can I simplify, cut apart, and consolidate this long post into a short post? And so this is where inside the prism, it emerges into a little color. It's a little post now. Okay. So do you like
chrysalis and becomes a butterfly?
I was about to say our visual listeners are getting some great hand demonstrations here. Sorry, audio folks. But basically what you're doing is you're looking at how is it already written and how can I condense and simplify? How can I take a couple concepts and make one key idea in this post? The main mistake people make, whether they on any one of the headlines they select and on any content piece that they select, is they try and communicate too much in one post. And I say that as somebody who persistently communicates too much in one post. If you scroll back even, I don't know, 2 months, and I still every once in a while have this. I try and communicate way too much. I try and bring in all the different little things. Here's this idea, here's that idea. Oh, and don't forget about
Think
this.
of your spam folder.
And it's
Think of your spam guys. Like, go talk to one of your execs, go talk to your manager, anybody that owns a P&L. Ask to see some of their spam emails. Watch the question stacking. One call to action. And you'll notice that when you have emails or outreach that has multiple CTAs or blurred CTAs, it kills the vibe.
Yes.
Same thing with content.
Yes. And the thing is it doesn't even have to be a CTA, right? It can even just be a topic that you're talking about. So for example, I would say, how to warm up prospects by social. So I would talk about what it means to create content, and then I talk about how to send it out to your prospects in the algorithm. Those are two concepts. I would just stick with one. And this is why also people get really, I think, hesitant about creating content, because it seems like a lot of work. But now all you're doing is just one little color out of the prism, one little topic, one little idea, one of many you can write on this specific headline, on the specific topic you chose that you're answering. So that is the essential high level formula to do this. Are there specifics? Yes, of course. You could add in, okay, so that was maybe, let's call it 201 content. So let's go to 301 for a second. In 301, you're actually adding another filter on the prism called point of view. So instead of previously, you just took the topic, you found an existing asset, and you repackaged it. Now what you're doing is you're adding a third lens, a third bucket that says, how can I communicate a point of view on this? Now, a point of view can come across in a lot of ways. It can be a controversial point of view. You're taking a stand. You're planting your flag in the ground and you're saying, I think this. I did this week and disagreed with Chris Walker, and it earned a lot of attention. Sometimes it's a breakdown point of view. How, why, what? What do people know to do this effectively? Right? That's a breakdown point of view. There's a observational point of view. I saw this happen. Here's what I learned. There's a comparison point of view. This versus this, X versus Y, apples versus oranges. There's so many points of view that you can take. And all you're doing in a point of view in the 301, when you get more comfortable with just repackaging and you're adding on a layer and a lens, you're saying, I'm going to upgrade my content from just talking about existing assets and turning it into something a little more personalized, something a little more story driven, something a little bit more focused on a specific topic. And now you're actually adding in more and more space between all of the colors that you have, right? Because now, even though previously you took the headline topic, warming up prospects via social, and you took an existing asset and you created a post. Now with this third lens, this third layer, you can create 7 different versions of that one topic, right? You can do a controversial post, you can do a comparison post, you can do on and on and on and on and on, right? From just the one repackaging content. So that is the sort of like advanced layer, and it works really well. I would recommend that when you're more comfortable posting, period. So 101 was gym rep exercises. You're just posting. You're posting for your peers. And actually, before I get this, because I know we're close on time today, if you have questions about this, drop them in the chat and we'd love to answer them, because we'd love to answer your questions that you have about all this. So anyways, summary, 101. 101 is reps. Just posting for peers, especially talking about things going on in your life. It doesn't have to be super personal. It can be, I had this hilarious cold call, it went wrong. Any tips? Here's what happened. Or here's an outtake from this Vidyard recording I did. Or I just did this outreach cadence and it totally flopped. That's fine. Stories of failure are awesome. I love seeing those, and I always like and engage with those stories because they're inspiring. 201 is the Content Prism, where you take social listening, you're listening to all of your accounts, you're selecting a topic, you're generating a bunch of headlines off of that, ideas for posts, and then you're taking that one post and marrying it with an existing asset that your company hopefully has. And all you're doing is simplifying and packaging that idea into one post. That's 201. Okay, so you've upgraded from just posting to posting with focus. And then you add in 301, the third layer, which is a point of view. And those are experiments and tones and all the rest of that. And so I would articulate, if it's just posting is the base layer and then posting with focus is the second layer, the third layer is either like posting with personality or posting with a point of view. Because now what you're doing is, instead of just communicating value and doing indirect outreach to your accounts, you're starting to communicate why they should trust you. Why you? Why are you the vessel, right? And so that point of view is helping articulate things that are in their head through your content. And so that's the 101, 201, and 301 breakdowns of content. And Nick, if you'll allow me one last second on the soapbox, because I
Do
know
it.
I've been going for it for a hot second. All of this together to tie it all around now means that if you are running your connection strategy and your comment strategy and all the other direct outreach stuff Nick talked about, the more people connect with you, the more stuff that people are going to see in their feed from you. And now there's this little association they get. They see your photo, they see your name, they see your headline. And over time, that builds up into trust. So then when you send out an email, when you send a DM, when you do a direct campaign strategy, right? And or as a part of this campaign with content, you're running a campaign where you're warming them up and then you're doing direct outreach. Now they're like, oh, I've seen your stuff. How often that happens to us just because we're commenting and creating content?
That's still weird.
It's so weird.
Hey, I know you. From where?
From where?
Oh.
Oh, yeah. And that's the other thing, just because now there's we can't get into this too much today just because of time, but it's just because your target accounts aren't engaging with your content doesn't mean your target accounts aren't seeing your content, but it's also a delicate art where you want to make sure your target accounts are seeing your content. So there's some push and pull we can talk about at a later date about how to do that. But obviously, just because you're not getting every FBA manager you just connected with to engage with your content doesn't mean your content isn't resonating with them. It just, they're maybe part of the 90% of users who just don't like or comment at all.
But they're watching.
But they're watching.
Yeah, that's the biggest irony that it just doesn't get talked about that much. In sales, we always get taught for direct response, watch the response. What was the reverse engineer? Watch the results. But in a lot of this, in the indirect, it's kind of like a slow your roll. And so we talk about different timelines. It might be 30 to 60 days. And even look what Chris had commented about feelings. This is something that's actually really good when you have your notes in your meeting. Keep notes on the things that were misunderstood and the things that invoked a strong response, positive or negative. It's the polarity that gets virality, because that's what people hold on to. That if they experience that, they're all in.
Yeah.
It's kind of like people saying, is cold calling dead? It's polar. It's because it's polar. I'm kind of sick of seeing those posts, but
same with like our SDRs. Like, is it the end of the SDR? I know there's that big wave like 3 months ago on that. It's like,
they said that salespeople were going to be gone 30 years ago, but here we are.
Yeah. Persistent on against the no. So thank you everyone for joining today. If you liked this, we have a playbook called LinkedIn in 30 minutes that walks you through this and so much more. You can find it at b2bpowerhour.com. But also today, actually to Nick's last point, if you're interested in figuring out nonverbal cues, how to do better communication, we have a podcast episode today with Cindy Skalicki. It's great. It's episode 86, 85. I'm sorry. I'm really bad. I should know this before announcing it. It's the most recent one as of today when this episode goes live. It's a great one that Nick interviews her with to make your presentations better and to communicate clearly and what you should look for when you're doing so.
Yeah, it's hard because you can't go and just look at the boardroom and watch people's who they're turning to, who they're listening to. You can't get all those cues because you're just looking at a screen. And part of what Cindy even talks about is just how do you go and watch Zoom to watch for reaction. It's good.
Totally.
I would highly recommend it.
Well, thanks everyone. Happy Friday. And thanks for joining the B2B Power Hour.
When you guys are leaving, if you want to throw your biggest takeaway from today in the comments, we'd really appreciate it. Helps with our research as well.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Happy Friday.
Bye.